The metal walls of Kepler Station hummed with activity as soldiers from dozens of different worlds walked through its corridors. The newest training facility of the Galactic Defense Coalition was a marvel of engineering, built to house and train warriors from every corner of known space. Today marked the beginning of the most ambitious military program in galactic history. Commander Ziegler strode through the main training hall with confidence that only came from centuries of battlefield experience. His forearms moved with practice precision as he reviewed the datapad containing information about his new mixed species unit. Behind him, the most elite fighters from 3 major alien civilizations followed in formation. The Krex warriors were impossible to miss. Captain Thulmer stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian scales gleaming under the artificial lights. His massive claws could tear through steel plating, and his yellow eyes constantly scanned for threats. The 2 other Krex soldiers, Bextar and Corval, were equally impressive specimens of their warrior race. They had conquered 17 star systems in the last century alone. Moving with eerie coordination were the Vithak tactical specialists. HFY, their drone master, communicated with his team through rapid clicking sounds that no other species could understand. His insectoid features showed no emotion, but his compound eyes missed nothing. The Vithak had turned warfare into an exact science, using their hive mind abilities to coordinate attacks with mathematical precision. The most mysterious members of the unit were the Nixion scouts. Silinth appeared to be made of pure energy, contained within a vaguely humanoid form. She could phase through solid matter at will, making her nearly impossible to stop. Her people had mastered stealth warfare to such a degree that entire enemy fleets had been destroyed without ever seeing their attackers. These were the cream of galactic military might, warriors whose very names struck fear into the hearts of their enemies across the galaxy. They had come to Kepler Station expecting to work with equals, other apex predators from the dangerous corners of space. Instead, they found humans. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison walked into the training hall carrying a simple data pad and wearing a standard-issue uniform that looked plain compared to the advanced armor worn by the alien troops. He was average height for his species, with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of many years in service. Behind him came 4 other humans who looked equally unremarkable. Captain Lisa Rodriguez carried herself with military bearing, but her small frame seemed fragile next to the towering Krex warriors. Sergeant Ben Parker looked like he belonged in a supply depot rather than a frontline combat unit. Communications specialist Amy Chun appeared young and inexperienced, while medic Tony Walsh seemed more suited for a hospital than a battlefield. The alien troops exchanged glances that clearly conveyed their thoughts. These soft-skinned creatures were supposed to be their equals in combat? It seemed like a joke. Morrison stepped to the front of the assembled group and activated the holographic display system. Images of Earth and its history began to appear in the air above them. He spoke in a calm, professional tone that carried the authority of long experience. "Welcome to Joint Training Operations. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, and these are my team members. We're here to share tactical knowledge and learn from each other's combat experience." Captain Thulmer let out a low rumble that passed 4. Laughter among the Krex. The sound echoed through the training hall, causing several other aliens to turn their massive heads toward the humans. Even the normally disciplined Vithak allowed themselves a few amused clicking sounds. Morrison continued his briefing, seemingly unaware of the mockery. He spoke about Earth's military history, mentioning conflicts that had shaped human warfare over thousands of years. He talked about World War II, where millions of soldiers had fought across entire continents. He described Vietnam, where human forces had operated in hostile jungle environments for years. He mentioned peacekeeping missions on dozens of different worlds. "The key to human military doctrine," Morrison explained, "is adaptability. We've learned to fight in every environment imaginable, against enemies with superior technology and numbers." HFY's mandibles clicked rapidly in what the Vithak considered high humor. Through their hive mind network, he shared his amusement with his teammates. These primitive mammals thought their crude projectile weapons and basic tactics deserved respect from species that had mastered energy manipulation and quantum warfare. Silenthes. Energy form flickered in patterns that indicated barely contained. Mirth. Her people had been conducting interstellar warfare when humans were still discovering fire. The idea that these newcomers could teach anything to the galactic community seemed absurd. The mockery reached its peak when Morrison began describing legendary human warriors and their supposed achievements. He spoke of soldiers who had held impossible positions against overwhelming odds, of entire units that had refused to surrender even when facing certain death, of individuals who had continued fighting with severe injuries that should have killed them. Human military tradition emphasizes that no situation is hopeless, Morrison said, displaying images of various battlefields throughout Earth's history. We believe that determination and tactical flexibility can overcome almost any disadvantage. Captain Tholmer could no longer contain his amusement. His deep laughter boomed through the training hall, soon joined by similar sounds from the other Krex warriors. These soft creatures speak of facing overwhelming odds, he rumbled to his companions. But they have never faced true predators like us. Their legends mean nothing against real warriors. The Vthak drone master tilted his head in a gesture of dismissal. Any species can claim victories against other weaklings, Hyvex clicked to his team. But these humans would flee like prey animals when confronted with actual military might. Even Commander Zeekther seemed skeptical. He had reviewed the humans' physical specifications before the meeting. Their strength levels were far below galactic military standards. Their speed and reaction times were adequate at best. Their sensory capabilities were limited compared to most other species. Their weapons technology appeared to be centuries behind current galactic standards. Morrison noticed the barely concealed derision from the alien troops, but his expression remained neutral. Years of military service had taught him patience, though a slight tightening around his eyes suggested he was not as unaffected as he appeared. Captain Rodriguez exchanged a knowing look with Sergeant Parker. They had encountered this attitude before from other species when humans first joined the Galactic Defense Coalition. Most aliens assumed that physical superiority automatically translated to military superiority. They usually learned otherwise, but the lesson often came at a cost. Amy Chun continued taking notes, seemingly oblivious to the mockery around her. Her fingers moved steadily across her datapad, recording everything with the methodical precision that had made her one of the most effective communications specialists in the human fleet. Tony Walsh organized his medical supplies with calm efficiency, preparing for the training exercises that would begin the next day. He had served in enough combat zones to know that overconfident soldiers often became patients very quickly. As the briefing concluded, the alien troops began discussing their new human teammates in voices they made no effort to keep quiet. They spoke of requesting reassignment to units composed entirely of real warriors. They wondered if the humans might be better suited to support roles, perhaps handling supplies or administrative duties while the actual fighting was left to species built for combat. Morrison gathered his team and headed toward their assigned quarters. As they walked through the corridors of Kepler Station, he could feel the eyes of dozens of alien soldiers following them. He heard the whispered comments and barely restrained laughter. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, "they have no idea what they're dealing with, do they?" Morrison's weathered face showed the slightest hint of a smile. "No, Captain, they don't, but they will." The first day of joint training was complete, and the stage was set for lessons that none of the participants would ever forget. The aliens had made their judgments based on appearances and assumptions. The humans had listened, observed, and prepared for what was to come. Tomorrow, the real education would begin. The training simulation room on Kepler Station was massive, capable of recreating any battlefield environment known to the Galactic Defense Coalition. Commander Zeekther stood at the control panel, preparing to run the first combat exercise for his mixed-species unit. The alien troops gathered in their respective groups, checking their weapons and equipment with confident efficiency. The Krex warriors had equipped themselves with plasma cannons that could melt through armored vehicles. Their natural scales provided protection equivalent to military-grade armor, and their claws could slice through most known materials. Captain Thulmer flexed his massive arms, causing the energy cells in his weapons to hum with deadly power. The VTHAC tactical specialists had arranged themselves in perfect formation, their movements synchronized through their hive-mind connection. HFY carried a quantum disruptor that could phase enemy weapons out of existence, while his teammates wielded sonic cannons capable of shattering bone from 100 meters away. Their compound eyes tracked multiple targets simultaneously, processing tactical data faster than most computer systems. Silenth and the other Nixian scouts had already begun to fade in and out of visible reality, testing their phase shift capabilities. Their energy-based weapons could drain power from enemy equipment or overload electronic systems with a single shot. When fully phased, they became completely undetectable to most sensors and could pass through solid matter as if it were empty. In stark contrast, the human team appeared almost primitive. Morrison and his soldiers carried standard kinetic rifles that fired simple metal projectiles. Their body armor looked lightweight and basic compared to the advanced protection systems used by the other species. Even their communication equipment seemed outdated by galactic standards. Rodriguez adjusted the settings on her rifle scope, a mechanical device that the aliens found amusing in its simplicity. Parker checked his ammunition pouches, counting bullets like some ancient warrior preparing for battle with stones and sticks. Chane tested her radio equipment using electromagnetic frequencies that most species had abandoned centuries ago. Walsh organized medical supplies that included items as basic as cloth bandages and metal surgical tools. Commander Ziegther activated the first simulation scenario. The holographic environment shifted to show an urban combat zone with hostile forces entrenched in heavily fortified positions. Multiple enemy units were spread throughout the area, equipped with weapons and shields that matched current galactic military standards. "Begin exercise," Ziegther announced. The alien squads moved with devastating efficiency. The Krex warriors charged directly at the strongest enemy positions, their plasma weapons cutting through defensive barriers like paper. Thulmer's roar echoed through the simulation as he tore apart automated defense systems with his bare claws, showing the raw power that had made his species feared throughout the galaxy. The VTHAC team advanced with mathematical precision, their hive mind allowing them to coordinate attacks with perfect timing. HFY identified weak points in enemy formations and relayed the information instantly to his teammates. Their sonic weapons disabled entire groups of hostile forces before the enemies could even return fire. The Nixian scouts simply disappeared from normal space and reappeared behind enemy lines. Silenth phased through walls and barriers, striking at critical targets before vanishing again. Her energy weapons disrupted enemy communications and power systems, creating chaos that the other alien units exploited ruthlessly. Within minutes, the alien forces had achieved complete victory. The simulation ended with enemy forces eliminated and objectives secured with minimal damage to the attacking units. The performance was so impressive that even Commander Ziegther nodded his approval. Then it was the humans' turn. Morrison led his team into the same scenario. But from the moment they entered the simulation, everything seemed to go wrong. Their kinetic weapons barely scratched the advanced armor used by the enemy forces. Their communication equipment was jammed easily by enemy electronic warfare systems. Their lightweight armor provided little protection against the energy weapons they faced. Parker took cover behind a barrier that was quickly destroyed by enemy plasma fire. Chun struggled to maintain communications as her radio equipment was overwhelmed by enemy interference. Walsh was forced to drag wounded team members to safety while under heavy fire, using medical techniques that seemed to take forever compared to the advanced healing systems available to other species. Rodriguez attempted to coordinate the team's movements, but without the instant communication available to the VTHAC or the phase-shifting abilities of the Nixian, the humans appeared slow and clumsy. Their tactics seemed straightforward to the point of being predictable, lacking the sophisticated approaches used by the more advanced species. The human team was eliminated within the first few minutes of the exercise. The simulation ended with Morrison and his soldiers marked as casualties, their objectives unaccomplished and their performance rated as inadequate by the training system's computer. Captain Thelmer's laughter boomed through the observation area. Did you see how they tried to hide behind those barriers? Like small animals seeking shelter from a storm. This is what passes for military tactics among humans. HFY's mandibles clicked rapidly as he shared his amusement with the other VTAC through their mental link. Their reaction times are so slow. By the time they identified a threat, our people would have already eliminated it and moved to the next target. How did such a primitive species ever survive long enough to develop space travel? Silenth's energy form flickered in patterns that conveyed deep skepticism. Their weapons cannot even penetrate basic defensive systems. Against real military equipment, they would be helpless. Perhaps they survived on their world only because they never encountered true predators. Commander Ziegler reviewed the performance data on his display screen. The numbers confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Human reaction times were significantly slower than galactic military standards. Their weapons technology was indeed centuries behind current developments. Their armor provided minimal protection against modern energy weapons. Their tactical coordination was basic compared to the sophisticated methods used by other species. The second simulation was even worse for the humans. This scenario involved a rescue mission in a hostile environment with limited visibility and multiple unknown threats. The alien teams adapted quickly, using their superior senses and advanced technology to navigate the challenges. The Krex warriors used thermal vision to track enemies through smoke and debris. The VTAC processed multiple data streams simultaneously, creating detailed tactical maps that updated in real time. The Nixian scouts phased through obstacles to gather intelligence. That would have been impossible for other species to obtain. The humans struggled with basic navigation in the limited visibility environment. Their equipment failed to penetrate the interference that barely affected the more advanced systems used by other species. They moved slowly and cautiously, checking corners and clearing rooms with methods that seemed to take forever. Once again, the human team was eliminated quickly while the alien forces achieved their objectives with minimal effort. After the third failed simulation, Commander Ziegler called Morrison aside for a private conversation. The alien commander's forearms gestured toward the data displays showing the consistent poor performance of the human team. "Colonel Morrison," Ziegler said in a tone that attempted to be diplomatic, "I believe there may have been an error in the assignment of your people to this unit. Perhaps humans would be better suited to support roles within the coalition military structure." Morrison's weathered face remained expressionless, but his gray eyes seemed to grow slightly colder. "What kind of support roles did you have in mind?" "Commander? Supply management, perhaps," Ziegler suggested carefully. "Medical support for the real combat units. Communications relay stations on secure worlds. Your people clearly have value to the coalition, but these exercises demonstrate that frontline combat may not be where that value lies." Captain Thelmer had moved closer to listen to the conversation, no longer bothering to hide his contempt. "Any species can claim great victories when fighting against other primitive civilizations," he rumbled. "But real warfare requires abilities that these humans simply do not possess. They would be slaughtered in actual combat against modern military forces." The other alien troops murmured their agreement. They had run the simulations multiple times, and the results were always the same. Human physical capabilities fell far below galactic military standards. Their technology was obsolete. Their tactics were predictable and inflexible. Morrison listened to the criticisms without responding, his expression giving nothing away. But Rodriguez noticed something that the aliens missed completely. The colonel's hands were perfectly steady, and his breathing remained calm and controlled, despite the insults being directed at his species and his soldiers. Parker and June had also gathered nearby, ostensibly to check their equipment, but actually listening to every word. Walsh continued organizing his medical supplies, but his movements had taken on a different quality, more focused and deliberate than before. The simulations do not lie, Colonel, Commander. The tension in the training hall had grown thick enough to cut with a blade. Commander Ziegther could sense the frustration building among his alien troops as they watched the humans fail simulation after simulation. The mockery had evolved into something harder and more dangerous. Open contempt that threatened to destroy any possibility of unit cohesion. Captain Thulmer stepped forward from the group of Krex warriors, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human team. His yellow eyes gleamed with predatory amusement as he looked down at Morrison and his soldiers. The reptilian warrior's claws extended slightly, an unconscious display of dominance that every species in the galaxy understood. Perhaps, Thulmer rumbled in his deep voice, we should have a more direct demonstration of the differences between our species. A friendly combat exercise to help these humans understand their proper place in the military hierarchy. The other alien troops perked up with interest. The Vithak drone master Hyvex clicked his mandibles approvingly, while the Nixian scout Salenth flickered with energy patterns that suggested anticipation. They had all grown tired of watching the humans stumble through scenarios that any competent warrior should handle easily. Commander Ziegther considered the suggestion. A hand-to-hand combat demonstration might indeed settle the matter once and for all. It would give the humans a clear understanding of their physical limitations while providing valuable training data about interspecies combat techniques. Very well, Ziegther announced. We will conduct a series of unarmed combat demonstrations. Each species will have the opportunity to showcase their natural fighting abilities. Thulmer's grin revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth. I volunteer to represent the Krex. Any of the humans may face me, and I promise to use only a small portion of my strength to avoid causing permanent injury. The Krex warrior flexed his arms, and the sound of his muscles stretching was audible throughout the training hall. His claws could shred steel plating, and his bite could crush bone. Even holding back significantly, he would still possess overwhelming advantages in strength, speed, and natural weapons. Morrison stepped forward. Without hesitation, I'll take that challenge, Captain. Laughter erupted from the alien troops. Even some of the more disciplined Vithak allowed themselves amused clicking sounds. The idea of this small, aging human facing a Krex warrior in combat seemed like a joke that had gone too far. Colonel, Fulmer said with mock concern, are you certain? I am nearly twice your size and possess natural weapons that could kill most species accidentally. Perhaps one of your younger soldiers would be more appropriate? Morrison began removing his uniform jacket and rolling up his sleeves. His movements were calm and methodical, showing no signs of nervousness or fear. I appreciate your concern, Captain, but I think I can handle myself. Rodriguez watched her commanding officer prepare for the match, and she noticed something that made her heart race. Morrison's eyes had changed. The mild, professional expression he usually wore had been replaced by something much more dangerous. She had seen that look before, during the worst fighting on the rim worlds where human forces had faced impossible odds. Parker and Chun exchanged glances. They too recognized the subtle shift in their colonel's demeanor. The man who had patiently endured mockery and failed simulations was gone. Replaced by something that moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Walsh continued organizing his medical supplies, but his preparations had taken on new urgency. He had served with Morrison for many years and knew what that particular expression on the colonel's face meant. Someone was about to receive a very painful education. The alien troops formed a circle around the designated combat area, eager to witness what they expected to be a quick and decisive demonstration of Krex superiority. Commander Ziegther activated the training hall's recording systems to document the encounter for future analysis. Thulmer entered the circle with casual confidence, his massive frame moving with surprising grace for such a large creature. He had fought representatives of dozens of different species during his military career, and he had never encountered anything that could match Krek's strength and ferocity in close combat. Morrison stepped into the circle, and suddenly the difference in size became even more apparent. The human colonel looked tiny compared to the reptilian warrior, like a child challenging an adult to a wrestling match. The alien spectators murmured among themselves, wondering if they were about to witness something that bordered on cruelty. "Begin." When ready, Ziegler announced. Fulmer moved first, lunging forward with speed that should have been impossible for something his size. His clawed hands reached out to grab the human and end the match quickly and decisively. It was a move that had worked against every opponent he had ever faced. Morrison seemed to barely avoid the attack, stumbling backward and breathing heavily. He appeared to be struggling just to stay on his feet as Fulmer pressed his advantage. The Krex warrior's claws whistled through the air inches from the human's face, and it looked like only luck was keeping Morrison from serious injury. The alien troops nodded knowingly. This was playing out exactly as they had expected. The human was clearly outmatched and would be defeated within moments, but Rodriguez noticed something that the aliens missed completely. Morrison wasn't stumbling randomly. His movements followed patterns that she recognized from advanced human combat training. He wasn't barely avoiding Fulmer's attacks. He was studying them, learning the Krex warrior's timing and preferred techniques. Fulmer grew more confident as the match continued. The human seemed to be weakening, his movements becoming more desperate as the reptilian warrior's superior. Strength and speed began to tell. The Krex captain decided to end the demonstration with one final, overwhelming attack. He lunged forward with both arms extended, intending to grab Morrison and pin him to the ground in a display of dominance. That would settle the matter permanently. It was a move that had never failed him before. Combining his massive strength with his lightning-fast reflexes, what happened next shocked every alien in the training. Hauled into complete silence, Morrison didn't try to avoid the attack or match. Fulmer's strength. Instead, he flowed like water around the Krex warrior's charge, using his opponent's momentum and overconfidence against him. The human's hands moved with surgical precision, striking pressure points and nerve clusters that most species didn't even know existed. Fulmer found himself flying through the air before he realized what had happened. The reptilian warrior's massive frame hit the training hall floor with enough force to shake the entire room. Before he could recover, Morrison was on top of him, one knee pressed against his throat and both hands, positioned to deliver crippling strikes to vital areas. The transformation in the human colonel was complete. Gone was the mild-mannered officer, who had endured mockery and failed simulations. In his place was something that radiated controlled violence and tactical expertise that made even the most experienced alien warriors step backward instinctively. Morrison's voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the suddenly silent training hall. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of, Captain? This is me holding back. Just like we've been holding back in every exercise so far." Fulmer's yellow eyes were wide with shock and something that might have been fear. The Krex warrior was pinned helplessly by an opponent he had dismissed as weak and primitive. Every instinct told him to struggle, but the precise positioning of Morrison's hands made it clear that any sudden movement would result in serious injury. "Commander." Ziegler stared at the scene before him, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. The combat data his sensors had recorded made no sense according to everything he knew about human physical capabilities. Morrison had moved faster than should have been possible for his species, struck with precision that exceeded most military targeting systems, and displayed tactical awareness that rivaled the best Vithak commanders. The other alien troops exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were supposed to be weak, slow, and technologically inferior. They weren't supposed to defeat Krex warriors in single combat using nothing but knowledge and technique. Morrison held his position for several more seconds, letting the lesson sink in, then smoothly released Fulmer and helped the massive warrior to his feet. The gesture was performed with the same casual efficiency he had used to defeat him, showing no signs of effort or strain. "That was impressive," Fulmer admitted grudgingly as he rubbed his throat. "But surely that was your maximum capability. No species can maintain such performance consistently." Morrison's weathered face showed the slightest hint of a smile, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. "Captain, that was me operating at about 20% of my actual combat capability. and are not even considered exceptional by human military standards. The silence in the training hall was profound. Every alien present was reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity and their place in the galactic military hierarchy. Silanth's energy form flickered with patterns that conveyed confusion and disbelief. How is this possible? Your physical specifications indicate that such performance should be impossible for your species. Rodriguez stepped forward, her own demeanor having shifted to something more. Commander Ziegler's forearms trembled slightly as he processed what he had just witnessed. The defeat of Captain Thulmer had shattered every assumption he held about human military capabilities. His analytical mind struggled to reconcile the data he had collected with the reality he had just observed. "Explain," Ziegler demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having his questions answered immediately. "Your performance records indicate clear physical limitations. How is what we just saw possible?" Morrison straightened his uniform and looked directly at the alien commander. "You want explanations? Computer, activate historical database. Authorization Morrison, Alpha Charlie 9. Load scenario package Delta 77. The training halls. Holographic systems came to life, filling the space with images that made the alien troops step backward in surprise. They found themselves standing in the middle of a destroyed city, with buildings reduced to rubble and smoke rising from countless fires. The sound of explosions echoed through the air, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled their nostrils. "Welcome to Stalingrad," Morrison announced. "Earth calendar year 1942. This is one battle from one war on one continent of our homeworld." The aliens watched in growing amazement as the historical recreation unfolded around them. Human soldiers moved through the ruins with grim determination, carrying weapons that looked primitive even by early galactic standards. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by enemies who controlled the sky and most of the surrounding territory. The enemy had better equipment, more soldiers, and complete air superiority, Morrison explained as scenes of combat played out around them. They had tanks that could destroy entire buildings, aircraft that could bomb our positions at will, and supply lines that stretched across continents. Havex clicked his mandibles nervously as he watched human soldiers continue fighting even when their positions were being bombed into dust. Why did they not surrender? Any rational military force would have negotiated terms when the situation became hopeless. Morrison's expression hardened. "Because we don't know how to quit. Watch." The simulation shifted to show individual acts of heroism that defied logical explanation. A single human soldier held a strategic building against 50 attackers for 3 days with nothing but a rifle and determination. A group of medics continued treating wounded soldiers even as enemy shells exploded around their makeshift hospital. Engineers repaired bridges under direct fire, knowing they would probably die but completing their work anyway. This battle lasted 200 days, Rodriguez added, stepping forward to provide context. 200 days of fighting in conditions that would kill most galactic species within hours. We held the city because giving up was not an option. The simulation changed to show other human conflicts. The aliens watched scenes from the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartan warriors faced an army of hundreds of thousands. They saw the siege of the Alamo, where a small group of defenders fought to the last man against overwhelming odds. They witnessed the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, where civilians armed with improvised weapons fought against professional soldiers. Captain Thulmer, still rubbing his throat from the earlier demonstration, stared at the images with growing understanding. These are not isolated incidents. This pattern repeats throughout your history. Every war, every battle, every conflict, Parker confirmed. We've been fighting ourselves for thousands of years. Civil wars where both sides knew all the same tactics, had the same training, used the same equipment. It forced us to constantly adapt and improve. The simulation showed scenes from more recent human conflicts. Vietnam, where human forces operated in hostile jungle environments for years. Afghanistan, where soldiers fought in mountain terrain that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. Peacekeeping missions on distant worlds where humans faced enemies they had never seen before, Amy Chun stepped forward to explain the communications aspect. Every battle taught us something new about coordination under extreme stress. We learned to maintain command and control when everything was falling apart around us. We developed backup systems for our backup systems. The aliens watched as human. Soldiers continued operating even when their equipment failed. Their communications were jammed and their supply lines were cut. They improvised weapons from battlefield debris, created new tactics on the spot, and found ways to keep fighting even when conventional military wisdom said they should retreat. Tony Walsh pointed to scenes of battlefield medicine that made the alien medics uncomfortable. We learned to keep soldiers fighting with injuries that would incapacitate most species. Not because we don't value life, but because sometimes you have to keep going until the job is done. The simulation reached its climax with scenes from the most desperate human battles. Soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in trenches filled with mud and blood. Pilots ramming their aircraft into enemy ships when they ran out of ammunition. Infantry units charging machine gun positions because someone had to take the objective. "You fight until you die," Silenth observed, her energy form flickering with what might have been respect. "Even when death is certain, you continue," Morrison nodded grimly. "We fight until we win or until there's no one left to fight. That's what humans do. That's what we've always done." Commander Ziegler studied the historical data streaming across his displays. The numbers were staggering. Humans had fought hundreds of major wars, thousands of smaller conflicts, and countless individual battles where small units faced impossible odds. The pattern was consistent across all of human history. But why? Ziegler asked. Why continue fighting when logic dictates surrender? Why accept casualties that other species would consider unacceptable? Rodriguez answered with quiet intensity. Because someone has to hold the line. Someone has to stand between civilization and chaos. If we don't do it, who will? The alien. Commander felt something he had never experienced before, a chill that ran through his entire body. He was beginning to understand that he had not been training with primitive warriors who happened to have space travel. He had been working with members of a species that had turned warfare into an art form through necessity and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Your combat simulations, Morrison continued, were designed to showcase the advantages of superior technology and physical capabilities. But humans learned long ago that wars are not won by the strongest or the fastest. They are won by whoever refuses to quit. The simulation changed one final time, showing human forces in more recent conflicts across the galaxy. The aliens watched as human soldiers adapted to environments they had never seen before, learned to fight enemies with completely different capabilities, and developed new tactics that worked against opponents who should have been impossible to defeat. Every species in the coalition fights until the odds turn against them, Parker explained. Humans fight until we win or until there's no one left standing. We learned that from fighting each other for thousands of years. Hivex processed this information through his hive-mind connection, sharing the implications with his teammates. You are saying that your entire species has been shaped by constant warfare. That conflict is your natural state. Not our natural state, Morrison answered. Our chosen state. We fight not because we love war, but because we love what we're protecting. And we've learned that sometimes the only way to protect something is to be willing to die for it. The training hall fell silent as the simulation ended. The alien troops stood surrounded by the fading images of human warfare, their minds struggling to process what they had learned. These were not the weak, primitive creatures they had been mocking. These were the descendants of warriors who had spent millennia learning how to win against impossible odds. Commander Ziegler looked at Morrison with new understanding. The failed simulations, the poor performance ratings, were us operating under rules of engagement designed for training. Exercises with allied forces, Rodriguez finished. We don't show our real capabilities until we know who we're working with and what the mission requires. Thulmer stepped forward, his massive frame no longer seeming quite so intimidating. What you showed me in combat, that was really only 20% of your capability? Morrison's smile was grim but genuine. Captain, what I showed you was basic hand-to-hand combat training that every human soldier learns in their first year of service. We haven't even begun to demonstrate what we can do when we stop holding back. The alien warriors exchanged glances filled with uncertainty and dawning respect. They had come to Kepler Station expecting to train with inferior species who needed their protection. Instead, they had discovered that they were working alongside the descendants of predators who had turned an entire planet into their hunting ground. So, Ziegler said slowly, when you speak of human legends, of impossible victories and last stands against overwhelming odds, Tuesday, Morrison replied simply. For humans, fighting impossible odds isn't legendary. It's just another day at the office. The atmosphere in the training hall had changed completely. Where once there had been mockery and contempt, now there was careful respect and growing curiosity. Commander Ziegler studied the human team with new eyes, seeing not primitive warriors, but battle-tested veterans who had been deliberately concealing their true capabilities. I believe, Ziegler announced to the assembled troops, that we need to conduct a more realistic assessment of combat capabilities. Computer, load scenario. Omega Prime 7. Full combat parameters, no safety restrictions. The alien troops straightened with attention. Omega Prime 7 was a legendary training scenario based on actual coalition military disasters. It had been designed to test the absolute limits of military units, and most teams that attempted it failed completely. Even elite alien forces rarely achieved more than partial success. The holographic environment shifted to display a hostile alien world with a toxic atmosphere, extreme weather conditions, and multiple enemy forces using unknown technology. Civilian evacuation points were scattered across impossible terrain, and friendly forces were cut off from support and resupply. Mission parameters, Ziegler continued, are search and rescue of coalition civilians trapped behind enemy lines. Environmental hazards include acid rain, unstable ground, and atmospheric conditions that will damage most equipment within hours. Enemy forces are using adaptive technology that learns from your tactics and adjusts accordingly. Captain Thulmer flexed his claws nervously. Commander, my unit has attempted this scenario 3 times. We have never achieved more than 60% success rate, and we usually lose half our team members in the process. Hivex's mandibles clicked with concern. The adaptive enemy technology is designed to counter VTHAC hive-mind coordination. Previous attempts have resulted in complete tactical breakdown when our communication networks were compromised. Silanth flickered with energy patterns that conveyed deep worry. Nixian phase shifting becomes unreliable in the environmental conditions of this scenario. The toxic atmosphere interferes with our energy-based abilities. Morrison listened to the concerns without comment, then turned to his team. Standard loadout or full combat gear? Rodriguez checked her equipment pouches. I recommend full combat gear, sir. This sounds like a real mission rather than a training exercise. Agreed, Morrison replied. Everyone switched to actual combat loadouts. No more training restrictions. The alien troops watched in fascination as the human team began changing their equipment. Gone were the simple kinetic rifles and basic armor they had been using in previous exercises. In their place came weapons and gear that looked far more advanced than anything the aliens had expected humans to possess. Parker strapped on armor, plating that incorporated reactive camouflage and environmental protection systems. His rifle was replaced with a modular weapon system that could adapt to different combat situations automatically. Chun's communication gear expanded into a sophisticated battlefield management system that could coordinate multiple units across vast distances. Walsh's medical equipment transformed from basic bandages and tools into an advanced trauma system, capable of keeping soldiers fighting through injuries that would normally be fatal. His own armor included chemical protection and atmospheric recycling systems that would allow operation in the most hostile environments, but it was Morrison's transformation that truly caught the aliens' attention. The mild-mannered colonel who had endured their mockery was gone. replaced by a warrior who moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of combat. His equipment included weapon systems that the aliens didn't recognize and tactical gear that seemed to anticipate battlefield requirements before they arose. "Begin exercise," Ziegler announced. What followed was a masterclass in human military doctrine that left the alien observers speechless. Where the previous alien attempts had relied on overwhelming force or superior technology, the humans approached the scenario with a completely different philosophy. Morrison immediately divided his team into overlapping support networks rather than traditional unit structures. Rodriguez took point not because she was the strongest fighter, but because her tactical analysis skills allowed her to identify threats and opportunities that the others might miss. Parker covered multiple angles simultaneously, using his weapon systems in ways that the manufacturers had never intended but that proved devastatingly effective. Chun established communication networks that functioned despite the environmental interference, creating backup systems and redundant pathways that kept the team coordinated even when primary systems failed. Walsh positioned himself to provide both medical support and covering fire, turning his healing duties into tactical advantages. The adaptive enemy technology that had defeated previous alien attempts found itself completely confused by human tactics. Instead of following predictable patterns, the humans constantly changed their approach, improvising new solutions to each challenge as it arose. When their equipment began failing due to environmental damage, the humans didn't retreat or call for resupply. Instead, they modified their gear using battlefield materials, creating new tools from the wreckage of destroyed equipment. When conventional tactics proved ineffective, they invented new approaches that used their limitations as advantages. The alien troops watched in amazement as the human team achieved objectives that should have been impossible. They rescued civilians from locations that other species couldn't even reach. They neutralized enemy positions using tactics that the adaptive technology couldn't predict because no one had ever tried them before. Most importantly, they never stopped moving forward. When one approach failed, they immediately tried another. When team members were injured, they found ways to keep fighting. When their equipment was damaged, they made it work anyway through pure stubborn determination. Captain Thelmer found himself leaning forward, studying every move the humans made. They're not following any standard tactical doctrine. They're making it up as they go along. That's the point, Rodriguez explained during a brief pause in the action. Standard doctrine assumes standard conditions. We learned long ago that real combat rarely follows the textbook. 5X processed tactical data through his hive mind network, sharing analysis with his teammates. Their success rate is exceeding our best performance by over 40%. But their methods should not work according to military science. Military science, Morrison replied while reloading his weapon with smooth efficiency, is what happens when someone tries to turn warfare into a predictable system. Humans learn that war is chaos, and the only way to succeed in chaos is to be more adaptable than your enemy. The scenario reached its climax when the human team faced a situation that had defeated every previous attempt. Multiple civilian groups were trapped in different locations, enemy forces were converging from all directions, and environmental conditions were deteriorating rapidly. The alien observers expected the humans to choose which civilians to save and abandon the rest, as previous teams had been forced to do. Instead, Morrison's team did something unprecedented. They split up and went after all the civilian groups. Simultaneously, it was a tactical decision that violated every principle of unit cohesion and mutual support. It should have resulted in the team being defeated in detail by superior enemy forces. Instead, each human operator became a force multiplier, using the chaos and confusion to their advantage. Silenth watched in fascination as the humans turned their apparent weakness into strength. They are using the enemy's assumptions against them. The opposing forces expect coordinated resistance, so the humans are providing uncoordinated chaos that achieves coordinated results. The exercise ended with complete mission success. All civilian groups had been rescued, enemy forces had been neutralized or scattered, and the human team had suffered minimal casualties despite operating in conditions that had previously defeated elite alien units. Commander Ziegler stared at the final statistics in disbelief. The humans had not only succeeded where others had failed, but they had done so while making the operation look almost routine. Captain Felmer stepped forward, his massive frame now conveying respect rather than contempt. Colonel Morrison, I owe you and your species an apology. I judged you based on surface appearances and failed to understand the depth of your capabilities. Morrison accepted the apology with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout their time together. No apology necessary, Captain. You reacted based on the information you had available. That's what any good soldier would do. Hevex clicked his mandibles in a pattern that conveyed deep respect. Your species has turned disadvantages into advantages through pure tactical innovation. You fight not despite your limitations, but because of how you've learned to overcome them. Silence? Energy form flickered with patterns of genuine admiration. You have taught us that true military strength comes not from superior abilities, but from refusing to accept that any situation is hopeless. Commander Ziegler formally requested that the human contingent take leadership roles in the coalitions. Next major operation. The galaxy needs soldiers who don't know when to quit, he explained. And humans apparently never learned how to quit at all. Morrison gathered.